First story is titled, Am I the a-hole for refusing pay for college for a child I have no legal obligation to anymore? For the sake of length, I'll try to stick to the facts and keep it brief. I, 50 male, legally have 3 children with my ex, 51, Adam, 23 male, Chris, 21 male, and Sophie, 18 female. Biologically, the first 2 children are mine, and youngest is the result of my wife's infidelity. I discovered this the day when Sophie was 2-year-old, and we had to rush Sophie to the emergency room. I filed for divorce 2 months later. I got 50-50 custody of my own children, but since Sophie was legally mine, I had to pay child support for her and was very bitter and resentful about it. I tried to fight it at first, but in the end, decided to suck it up to save myself the stress. But I made it very clear to my ex that outside of child support, I would take no other responsibility for the girl and would shut down any attempts at being her father. But I would make the effort to still be polite to Sophie. After some time, I learned to trust again and remarried a wonderful woman who made it very clear that she and her daughter were a package deal. I accepted this and did everything I could to try and be there for my stepdaughter, Katie, 17 female. Aside from typical ups and downs, I would say I managed to make a great family life for myself. We'd have family nights. I attended most after-school events, took my family on fun vacations, and put my sons through school and paid for their apartments and cars. They were on their own for gas money. Chris is expected to graduate this coming summer, and I made a silly post on social media about how relieved I was going to be that I only had one more kid to put through school left. A couple of days later, I got a message from my ex asking me to pay for Sophie's college expenses on my own, since the pandemic has made money tight. I asked her what she meant, and she referred to my post, and I reminded her that my legal obligation to Sophie ended the day she turned 18, and that I was talking about Katie. My ex was furious, demanded to know why I was willing to pay for Katie and not Sophie, since neither of them are related to me. I countered by saying that I knew up front Katie wasn't my biological child, and agreed to care for her instead of being conned into doing it like I was for Sophie. After that, I got a call from Sophie, asking what she did to make me hate her so much and to leave her feeling so excluded. I told her softly that I don't hate her, and that nothing about this situation was her fault, but the simple truth is that it wasn't personal. I'm just not her father. Since then, my sons have told me that Sophie was becoming really depressed. My ex is blaming me, but I don't see what I have to do with it. Am I the a-hole? Edit, just to be clear because I keep seeing the same questions. 1. The kids know why I divorced their mother. 2. My ex claims that Sophie was the result of a one-night stand and doesn't know who her father is, which is one of the reasons why I was kept on the hook for child support. 3. After I learned the truth, I was very angry and didn't think I could handle raising a child that I was tricked into caring for, so I decided to keep my distance. 4. Just because Sophie wasn't mine and I treated as such doesn't mean that I was horrible to the girl. I also made sure that my children knew that what happened between their mother and me was not Sophie's fault and they should never be mean to her. Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. That poor girl. You don't have any legal or moral obligation to her, but she's taking the brunt of the consequences for your failed relationship, and none of this is her fault. Opie's not the one who failed in that relationship. It was her parents that were the failures. Regardless of the who's in the wrong question here, the grim reality is that Opie should be prepared to lose his sons. Some things that shouldn't necessarily be sides issues are going to end up being that way anyways. Of course, it has always been incredibly upsetting and confusing to Sophie that her legal father is distant and stilted with her while having a relationship with her brothers. And of course, her brothers have grown up witnessing that grief and have complicated feelings about it themselves. To children, that would come across as arbitrary cruelty. As young adults, they may understand it intellectually, but that doesn't mean they feel it the way Opie does. Now it is coming to a head, with Sophie realizing her adult life is going to be dramatically harder than her brothers. Again, through no fault of hers, and her brothers can appreciate that that is brutally unfair, and they're all at home together experiencing this collective trauma of quarantine. And Opie is in a different home, with a different family that he has chosen for himself. That by no means makes him an a-hole, but in his son's position, I couldn't imagine my heart not breaking for my sister and feeling with resentment for my father. It can be no a-holes here, but still be a no-win situation where Opie will have to make the choices he makes and have to live with the consequences. I guess technically not the a-hole, but it's hard to wrap my head around loving a child for 2 years, then stopping, since she wasn't biologically yours. Well, realizing that you were lied to and tricked into being someone's parent can play a huge role into it. Not the a-hole, your ex knew that Sophie was not yours. You made it clear you were done supporting her once you were no longer legally responsible. There is one huge a-hole in this. That is your ex. 1. She cheated on you. Had you believing you were the child's father and had you stopped paying child support until Sophie was 18. 2. Your ex was too selfish to plan for Sophie's education. That is her fault, not yours. I just want to add that Katie has nothing to do with this. Whether you had a stepdaughter or not, you would not be paying for Sophie's education. So, your ex or anyone else should not be bringing up the fact you're willing to pay for Katie's education, but not Sophie's. The two things are mutually exclusive of each other. Just happen to be the same thing. I hope that last part made sense. Now for the second story. Am I the a-hole for telling my mom she didn't do crap in raising me? I, 25 female, have had a terrible relationship with my mother for most of my life. She has been pretty abusive emotionally throughout my life, doing things like taking away my bed so I had to sleep on the floor, locking away groceries so I had no food, giving away all my clothes to my younger sister, not letting me date or hang out with friends, etc. The rest of the family acknowledges she hasn't treated me well, but doesn't think she was abusive, and that I could have handled things better by compromising more. My dad separated from her when I was 6 and took my older sisters to live with his new wife. Mom got custody of me, but he has continued to pay for everything from my education. I got scholarships from high school to med school, and money for my share of the house utilities, etc. I even had to buy things like tampons out of an allowance he gave me, because she refused to, saying they were too expensive. Where I live, we have no concept of child protection, and parents are pretty much never ever considered to be wrong. Doing the bare minimum is seen as doing a favor to your child, so for almost 24 years, I've had to live with her abuse, and despite that, I've done pretty well in life. I graduated from med school recently and am moving soon to a different country for my new job. She started going on and on about how I should stay home to take care of her because she's invested her whole life in raising me. 24/7, she'll try to emotionally manipulate and guilt-trip me into being her unpaid caretaker. I tried to ignore her at first, but she kept listing out things like, I paid for your food, I gave you so many privileges and spent so much on you, so I got mad and told her she didn't do crap for me. I told her I never asked to be born, and she's not special for doing the absolute minimum for a child she brought into this world on purpose. She started crying and called my dad and sisters up, saying I was ungrateful and deliberately emotionally torturing her when she was sick. They're all telling me I am the a-hole because she has raised me for 25 years of my life and done her best, and that I didn't need to engage with her and create unnecessary drama when I'm going to be leaving soon anyway, especially since she has a chronic illness. So, am I the a-hole for denying her contribution to my upbringing and upsetting her for no reason? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole at all. If you do the bare minimum for me, I'll do the same for you. She never even paid for most of your stuff. It was your dad. Correct me if I'm wrong. Using the family to get on her side makes her an even worse a-hole. I'm really glad you left that house. Sounds horrible. You're correct. My dad paid for mostly everything. She occasionally bought groceries, but that was it. Not the a-hole. You just have a higher consciousness of right/wrong, and she is trapped by cultural constraints you don't want to continue in your life. On the flip side, she is scared of empty nest changes. Chalk it up to a blow-up confrontation, forgive her, and pursue your life. Maybe if you make good enough money, you can help her out, but your obligation is limited. Not the a-hole. Mom should have treated you better if she was expecting filial care from you, but from what you described, it sounds like classic narcissism. Your dad and sisters would also do well to remember that there's a reason why your dad separated from your mother. Not the a-hole. The sooner you can get away from this toxic family, the better. I wish you all the best in your new job. If your dad and sisters are so sympathetic to her, they can move back in with her. It's especially hypocritical of your dad, who ditched you and your mom when you were only 6, to try and guilt-trip you into serving her for life. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for not forgiving my parents? I, 34 female, grew up with one sibling, 36 female, and both parents. There were various kinds of abuse. My sister was also the golden child. I came out as gay when I was 16. They interrogated me until I admitted. They then taped a letter to my door indicating that I was going to hell. There were then various books in the house about how to cure homosexuality. I'm positive if my sister had been gay, they would have led pride parades. I left. I stayed with friends, partners, and well, anyone, until I could obtain some security a few years later. At first, I still went to family functions, but my parents wouldn't speak to me. My mother did not look at me. I did this for a few years until the anxiety was too much. Then, I only went to family events they weren't attending. They bought my sister a car, paid for her college, and all of her living expenses. I also attended college, had to go through a process so I wouldn't have to claim them on my FA/FSA. Therapist wrote a letter, and did graduate. But had given myself an ulcer due to the stress of being a full-time student with 2 jobs and a 16-hour unpaid internship. My parents only sent happy birthday texts. Then came my sister's wedding. She had 5 events I had to attend. I was a bridesmaid. During all of these events, they again didn't look at me. It was painful. About 2 years after this, they sent a text indicating that they wanted to give me money for the same amount they spent on my sister's wedding. I discussed with my therapist, and my therapist indicated my parents opted not to give me a lot of things I needed. But that doesn't mean I should feel shameful about taking what they are offering if there are no strings attached. So, I met with them for lunch with my then girlfriend. My dad did speak to me but spoke mostly about other trivial family matters, and my mother spoke only through my father. She would whisper something to my father, and he would then ask a question. They gave me a check for $10,000. My dad said something vaguely about being proud of everything I have overcome. I internally was very confused. Did they mean their own abuse? Their own homophobia? They never asked to see me again. I used the money as part of the down payment for my house. Married my wife a few years later. I did not tell them. I didn't hear from them for a few years other than the birthday messages. But in 2017, we began fostering. We took placement of a very sweet 14-month-old boy we adopted when he was 2.5 years old. I should mention my sister is child-free by choice. Since the adoption, I did not tell them. Any number of relatives could. My parents suddenly are vaguely sorry and now sending me weekly text messages. When I eventually indicated I felt this was only because of my child, they reportedly stated they didn't even know I had a child. They, however, not asked my child's name, age, how he came into existence, etc. They are now passively inviting me to various Zoom family events and really trying to have conversations. Am I the a-hole for not forgiving them? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. You don't need them in your life. If you're comfortable with the low contact, just continue that or go no contact if you want. Be sure to tell them why. Not the a-hole. In what world would you be the a-hole here? You've done fantastic for yourself in spite of them, not because of them. Go you. There is truly a lot I couldn't post because of the character limit. So my parents will text these apologies and truthfully, I won't respond. They then show these messages to family members who lack a lot of context. That is, I have not told them about the abuse and only vaguely spoken about their homophobia. And then they basically tell me I am a cold and unforgiving. If your parents are spreading lies, enlighten them on the truth. Don't let them paint you in a bad light just because you won't give them what they want, when they wouldn't even give you a scrap of love that you deserved and treated you like an outcast. I guess they aren't really lying. They're apologizing and I am not responding. They, of course, aren't going to divulge the abuse. When they are asked why we don't talk, they say something about me making poor life choices, which in my family means I'm using drugs. Hard drugs. I've had to explain I'm not. In fact, addicted to heroin more times than any adult ever should. I guess I struggle just putting it all out there, both because trauma/PTSD is real here, and because my goal isn't to vilify people. My parents somehow are functional outside of our household. I've not seen the same toxic behavior in their other relationship, and I'm not down to burn down the whole metaphorical house. Maybe I'm being naive here. Not the a-hole. They haven't asked for forgiveness. They may think slipping you $10,000 was enough, but it doesn't really make up for anything. Do you still have a relationship with your sister? Off and on. They sometimes use her as a way to force the relationship. That is, she cornered my wife, telling her she needed to convince me to forgive them, and they deserve to have a relationship with their grandchild. And that's the end of this video, folks. As always, leave a comment and hit like and subscribe. And if you want more of this content, turn your notification on to get updated on the latest videos. And I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe.